And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Rupert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection, I'm your host, Rupert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. It has been said that Skeena Cellulose failed due to a combination of factors, including weak forest product prices, low demand, high costs, and the oversupplied market. The company also faced issues with bad decision-making, inappropriate management practices, excessive government fees, and lack of optimal wood allocation. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 2001.
We will have to wait and see how this legislation in fact will going to proceed over the next dose. And if history proves true, it will likely take 24 to 36 hours for everything to be finalized and for longshore workers to be back in place and on the job.
The seemingly endless woes of Skeena Cellulose the last 4 years make it easy to forget that the decade prior to that, the company, under its former owner Rupert, was constantly growing. It expanded from its Terrace and Prince Rupert base, buying Groot Lumber of Smithers, Westar's Carnaby Sawmill, Buffalo Head and Orenda Forest licenses to the north, and the Hobenshield Mill in Kitwanga.
One thing you find in the forest industry is that fiber supply is everything. You'll see companies all over the province try to secure fiber supply. You've even seen that in the way companies have merged in recent years with companies like Weyerhaeuser taking over McMillan Bloedel. In the forest industry, access to fiber is the key, and I think Skeena Cellulose felt a number of years ago that should pulp prices skyrocket, they may have a shortage of fiber in an effort to sustain capacity at their pulp mill and capacity at their sawmills also.
Unfortunately, when prices finally did rise in 1995, Rupert was hit with a pulp workers' strike in Prince Rupert, and for many, that was the turning point.
It was an extended period of time. It was when pulp markets were were very good. In fact, it was probably the highest pulp's ever been. And there was a lengthy strike in Prince Rupert, which shut down the operation. And from there, in hindsight, when hindsight's 2020, we look back and we say that's really when Rupert looked like they had given up on BC and money started moving elsewhere.
Also, while Rupert was expanding, it was asking its logging and road building contractors and suppliers to endure lengthy waits to get paid.
Yeah, they went on quite a period of expansion, and I guess that might be where some of the bitterness comes from when they were buying operations, pursuing the Kitwanga mill and things like that. They were stretching us out, our payment terms out at that exact time, so we kind of felt if they're able to make purchases but aren't able to pay for their current logging activities, we're starting to get pretty nervous. And in addition to that, they were building paper plants elsewhere and purchasing mills in other provinces, and we were strung out for 60 and 90 days for payment.
Things finally came to a head in 1997 after an unsuccessful merger attempt with Avenor of Montreal. Rupert cut loose its BC operations, which immediately filed for protection from its creditors, as it was $620 million in the red. The contractors were owed millions.
Yeah, we were probably exposed as bad as you ever could be, having payment schedules stretched right out, and it being the winter season, the logging activity was quite active. We were producing lots of volume, and the check just never arrived, so there we were.
Enter the provincial government, underwritten by the Toronto Dominion Bank, who bailed out the company to the tune of $350 million. But what has ensued is 4 years of uncertainty, reflected in a dramatic slowdown in the Northwest economy.
It's caused a very difficult situation with respect to the city's budgeting, not knowing whether or not Skeena was going to be able to pay its taxes on time has created budgeting problems.
Renovations, instead of people, building something new, how do we make do with what we've got? That kind of a deal. And everybody hoped that there'd be some sort of a signal to move forward, some sort of a key to say, okay, it's time to start expanding again. And that just never really came.
We have some things to be thankful for, too. West Fraser has continued to operate by and large. The problems, they have problems too, but they are of a general nature that affects the forest industry throughout British Columbia. The repap SCI situation hurt us, but they did continue to operate off and on, and that helped us a bit, but certainly it was a troublesome time, and still is a troublesome time.
For the company itself, one important impact of the past 4 years of uncertainty was the inability to plan for the future.
It was very difficult. In the forest industry, and especially as a forester, a large part of our job is looking into the future, and we're planning anywhere from minimum 1, but usually 3 to 5 years in advance. Short term for us is 1 year. It's not 2 or 3 months. It's a year down the road. Under the ownership of the government, it was very short term. We all knew it was short term. Therefore, everything was done short term. There wasn't the longer term planning. Everything was geared towards a sale or a potential sale. And so it was very frustrating.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thanks for staying with us. When a bank calls in a loan, it means they're demanding immediate repayment of the outstanding balance. This can happen with certain types of loan, particularly demand loans like lines of credit, but also under specific conditions with term loans. Let us return to the archives to discover why TD called in a loan.
Maybe this should have happened 4 years ago. Maybe we would be 4 years further down the road and in a better position today with more certainty had the events unraveled the way they appear to be unraveling today.
At the end of August, the Toronto Dominion Bank said enough, and the province's new Liberal government decided its involvement had to end. As before, the contractors were left holding the bag as Skeena was forced to again get court protection from its creditors. They responded with a blockade of the company's sawmills in Terrace and Smithers, preventing for a while the already cut lumber from being shipped out to help Skeena earn some badly needed money. The bank also felt their wrath, and that of a Terrace City councillor who closed her account as a symbolic gesture. But now the government has offers to consider, and the courts have extended creditor protection till November the 5th. Still, there is not a lot of optimism that things will be settled by then. The contractors are worried about staying alive.
The profitability hasn't been there, and we've been working on stop-and-go operations, which is really expensive for a small business. Your fixed costs run 12 months of the year, and if you're only working 6 months of the year, then you got that other half a year to cover. So, like in the case of our operation, if you look at our history over the last 4 years, we've basically sold a piece of equipment every year to stay afloat.
If this goes on for much more than a year, I think you're going to see devastating impacts not only in the contracting community, but also in the small business community.
For Prince Rupert, one worry is the $11 million in taxes owed by Skeena Cellulose.
Obviously, the city would be in some financial difficulty. We would have to find a way of accounting for that $11 million, plus find a way of dealing with the fact that the $2 million annually that Skeena was contributing to the tax account in Prince Rupert would not be paid. So it would be very difficult.
And the company itself is worried that if its workforce moves away during a lengthy shutdown, finding replacements will be very, very tough.
It's hard enough to attract people to the Northwest, let alone to a company with a bad track record that Skeena has. So yes, it will be difficult.
The City of Terrace has formed a forestry panel chaired by Justin Rigsby, and its mandate is to come up with long-term options for SCI, perhaps including the creation of a community forest.
What happens right now, of course, is that when you hit down times and the larger company decides to shut down or curtail operations, but also curtails its harvesting operations and things along that line. When you're dealing with a community forest, what you can do is you have a different set of customers per se. You can market either raw logs or logs to other small manufacturers or what have you.
The irony is that everyone is anticipating some great times ahead for forestry here in northwestern BC.
We think the forests are in very good shape, and we've got a tremendous future ahead of us in that we've got a tremendous second growth coming on stream. The forests are growing bigger and faster than anybody expected or predicted. Unfortunately, we have this gap, and we've got some time until the second growth comes available and comes on stream. So that's really what we're faced with right now is how do we bridge that gap until the better quality second growth is available.
The situation at SCI has revived calls for the government to change its approach to forestry in general.
I think there are innovative solutions. I believe the operations here can make money, but there has to be a different way of doing business. Maybe they have to look at different products, and they certainly have to get rid of some of the bureaucratic regulations that exist with the forest industry right now to make it more efficient and get it back on its feet.
I hope that this can be looked at as an opportunity. That the whole scenario of the last 5 years points at the need for some very big changes in the forest industry, and it's been talked about for about 20 years and no one does anything. Maybe this will be enough of a motivator to actually do something about it. The whole tenure system and the marketing system has to change to get rid of these kinds of problems. So when there is a failure like this, it isn't necessarily the community that loses. It just seems that the last two times a major corporation has failed, and the ones that lose are the people that live in the Northwest, and that system has to change.
It's a challenging fiber base, is what it is. And there's been many suggestions, recommendations put forth over decades, really, to deal more effectively with it and to make it that much more competitive. The reality of the situation is I think if you want to make it competitive, the provincial government, as the landowner, really has to make a commitment to that, realize that it is a special area, and be willing to make for lack of better terms, a special set of rules for the area to make it competitive and treat it somewhat differently. If we can do that, then I think we can move forward as successfully as any other area out there.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. In the context of war or military strategy, a point of invasion refers to a strategic location where an invading army or force will attempt to enter or conquer new territory. This point is chosen for its geographical advantages, military strategic value, or potential of disruption. Let us return to the archives to discover why Prince Rupert was identified as a point of invasion.
It was probably one of the most unlikely spots in North America that you would think of in terms of a point of enemy invasion, but that's exactly what British, Canadian, and eventually American military officials considered Prince Rupert to be during World War II. With one of the deepest natural ice-free harbors on the continent and being the terminus of the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway, there were concerns that Japanese troops could gain entry to North American soil by way of the city. That's why British and Canadian forces built gun emplacements guarding the mouth of the harbor in the late 1930s. During the war, the city's population grew from a mere 6,000 to 21,000 with the addition of Canadian and American soldiers. The forts they manned are still in existence today, and that's where our story begins. The first site we visited was Frederick Fort, located on the southern tip of Digby Island. Our guide, William Trowell Jr., ferried us across to one of the coves on the eastern side of Digby, where our journey would begin. It wasn't long before we found the first remnants of military occupation.
So what is this, William? Well, my research isn't complete yet on Frederick Fort, but I believe that this was a junction station for power. The power would come in and then just go off, and this was a hatch here for access into it. Once again, my research hasn't been yet completed.
Now, I understand there used to be a bridge here. The road came right through here.
Yeah, the road it went past Emerson, where Camp Emerson is, and actually you can still see a lot of the ties that are strewn about. This was actually a bridge over top of this creek.
Not too far along, we found even more evidence of the road which once led to Frederick Fort.
So it's really surprising we've been able to find this. Now, Will, we are on the road right now.
Yeah, we are clearly on the road. As you can see, there's a nice clear line going all the way down. This is the old road that we're actually standing on here.
How could it have lasted this long like this?
Military engineering.
Really? Okay. Is that good, is it?
Of course. Canadian military.
Okay, well, let's get moving.
There were even more reminders of the road as we traveled along, such as this old bridge. But soon the road started to disappear and the bush closed in, until we arrived at another site of occupation.
Whew. That was some hike. I want to just stress something before we move on here, and that is that this trail isn't easy to get along. So if you're not an experienced hiker, you might not want to come out here on your own. In fact, you're probably better off bringing someone like Will along who knows the trail and can get you through it. There's a lot of bogs, barbed wire, sinkholes, creeks, a lot of slippery spots. So please, if you're not an experienced hiker, don't come out here. Now, we've come into a clearing here. There's a lot of cement foundations left. What exactly was this spot?
This is where all the wooden structures were, officers' quarters, barracks, office space and such. In fact, right behind you is a stove, which was a heating stove.
So this was mainly living quarters then?
Living quarters and, like I said, office space and that. But yes, they had to build the cement foundations fairly high off the ground as well due to the bog and the wet nature of the north coast.
Okay, now are we pretty close to the fort now?
We're about another 10 minutes. This was a fairly large fort, not as big as Barrett, but it was large in itself. It's the second largest in Rupert.
After that, it was back into the bush again, and believe me, it wasn't easy.
Did you ever see the Blair Witch Project? Well, this reporter and his cameraman are almost lost out here. No, actually we're not. I'm just kidding. But take a look around. This place is just surrounded with salmonberry bushes. This is an actual trail we're on right here, and if you look through that bush right over there, there's actually a boardwalk in there. Not much of one left, but there's a boardwalk. Now, the fort's just down here, but I just want to stress one more time, if you're not an experienced hiker, don't come out here, or unless you know somebody that knows the trail. So come on, let's go down to the fort. So here we are, finally, Frederick Fort. You know, I've got to say, I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a Vietnam War movie set. What is this that we're in right now?
This was the operations center of Frederick Fort, and these structures were built well over 60 years ago, and as you can see, time has taken a toll on it. Most of the structures themselves are still standing, but nature has taken it back.
Frederick Fort is not very big and in fact served more as a lookout, and as a result was armed with much smaller caliber weapons.
This was built right into the cliff face. This fort was built right into the cliff face here. As you can see, there's the part of the cliff face there, and there's actually a passage down the side of that one there.
Mm-hmm. Now where would that go? Just back out onto the...
It goes back. This is another building here which had office space and operations center in it.
Other than the debris from the cliff and the ever-encroaching brush, Frederick is still in pretty good shape. You're still able to get inside some of the buildings where the operations center would have been housed, and if you climb up on top, you can still get a good view of the outer harbor.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
In 1938, Major Tria of the Canadian War Department inspected the west coast of Canada and determined suitable locations for coastal defenses. Barrett Point became the focal point of the defenses that included gun batteries at Frederick Point, Casey Point, Fairview Point, and Douglas Point. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to visit Frederick Point.
Just across the water from Frederick is the largest of the World War II facilities, Barrett Fort. Located on Ridley Island, just around the corner from the grain terminal, Barrett is much easier to get to. It's an impressive site with a lot more to see.
Now this here, Scott, is magazine number 1 of 3 magazines. This is where all the ammunition was stored for Barrett Fort. And there's an elevator that would raise it up to ground level where the guns were located. This is the interior of magazine number 1. Magazine number 2 and 3 are fairly flooded. In here was where the shells were kept for the guns that would be watching the entrance to the harbor. And as you can see, there's still most of the remnants of the where the shells were held is still here. And these were where all the shells were kept for the large guns that were above us.
How big were the list of gun that was here?
I haven't been able to get the information directly, but I do believe that it was around an 8-inch gun. So that you would have fairly large shells down here. And they would be lifted, they'd be carried through. There's an access hatch down the far end, and it would cut across and then up on an elevator. And the elevator is actually still operational. It just needs to be cleaned up and maintained.
What's this right above your head? I see we got a little hatch here.
These are vent shafts, just for air circulation.
Okay, William, this is the elevator shaft you mentioned. Can you just describe it for us?
The elevator shaft was simply put a pulley system. It was mechanical. It would raise the shells up to the ground level, and as we will see later on, it would break out onto the ground level, and the shells would then be moved to the gun, which was believed to be an 8-inch gun. The shaft itself is still in fairly good shape for being over 50 years old, and a bit of care, a bit of maintenance, it would be easily brought back to near operational stages.
Yeah.
And right behind you, actually, this is the...
I was going to ask him about this. What is this?
This is the air shaft, the main air shaft. It was also an access route as well, and it would lead up to the ground level where a vent was on top. That vent would be able to slide over to allow exit of the structure here, just in case it was blocked. And as you can see, there are doors. These doors are long but gone. They won't be able to be moved, but it would seal it there as well. So this would be a sealed building, except for the air vents and the ceilings.
There are 3 large gun emplacements at Barrett Fort, which would have defended the city and the harbor. But alas, other than the odd exercise, they were never put to use. Despite the inactivity of the military installations, there is still some thought to restoring the site as a memorial and a tourist attraction. Trowell says the first stage in restoration is public awareness.
Let the public know that this plan is getting going, and also to get public support for it. It's going to take a lot of people, a lot of work. It's not a one-person job. And the assistance of all levels of government, municipal, federal, and provincial, and even private citizens and corporations would be required. And that would be the first stage. The second stage is, once the support is there and approval is there, is going on to the making of the entire site safe. And that's the primary concern of all parties, is to make sure it's safe so no one gets injured. Then we would clear out this lot and of all the brush and of all the alders, and bring it back to where you could come for a walk, come for a picnic, and you would have a huge amount of area for people to come out and enjoy the spectacular view as well. The military forts would then slowly, step by step, from going from Magazine 1 all the way through, would be revitalized, working from the inside out. People would still be able to come out here and enjoy it while the work is happening after it's all cleared. And the final stage, after all the cement structures are set up, is rebuilding of all the wooden structures.
It's work that Trowell is obviously quite passionate about and wants to see through to the bitter end.
It's a major part of Rupert's history. It is out of respect to the many persons that have served during World War II, both here and abroad. With our cruise ship facility getting built and the expansion of that, this would be an excellent area for the tourist dollars and for tourists to come and see it and enjoy it and stay in Rupert for a bit longer than more than a day. It would also work wonderful. It would also work quite well in conjunction with North Pacific Cannery. We know that it works out there, and it has done quite well for itself. It can be done here as well.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our mystery within. I'm Robert Pictou.